Hello. So we are jumping right into part 3 of our ethics series, and this is on boundaries and dual relationships. So, of course, a lot of this content is going to be on your LCSW and your LMSW exam. So, I'm going to try to give you very short, straight to the point information that you can take and you can apply it to your test process, as well as answering questions and be well prepared on exam day. I'm going to start out with the objective of this training is just to clarify the ethical responsibilities in managing professional boundaries and avoiding dual relationships. That is a huge, huge piece when it comes to our profession, and sometimes those lines getting blurred when you're working with individuals. And just going to give you a brief overview. So, boundaries in social work protect not only us, but also our clients. But sometimes those lines get blurry, especially when it comes to dual relationships. So, in this video, we're going to talk about the dual relationships, like what they are, why they're risky, and how you can manage them ethically.
So, have you ever found yourself in a situation where a client wants to be more than friends? Like maybe a business partner, or for you to purchase something or do some type of dealings in their business?
Today, we're going to dive into these boundaries and why it's so important to keep these things intact, and for you guys to know how to appropriately handle them as you become LCSWs and work towards that LCSW. So, understanding professional boundaries. Boundaries are the invisible lines that keep the professional relationship between social workers and their clients healthy and appropriate. So, just imagine this is your client and this is you, and there's a line right down the middle. That is the boundary that you can't cross over and the client can't cross over. That is a boundary, that indivisible line that keeps both of you guys appropriate and healthy as you continue the working relationship. So, to ensure that we provide the objective ethical services without being biased, that is why we have these boundaries in place. So, when boundaries get crossed, you go over that line or the clients go over the line, it can be harmful to not only the practitioner, but to the client as well. And it can cause emotional, psychological, and sometimes legal issues. So, why do boundaries matter? They maintain that power balance in that client social worker relationship. The client should always feel safe and respected, knowing that this relationship is strictly professional and nothing else. Dual relationships, let's define that. A dual relationship is when you have more than one relationship with a client, whether it's personal, professional, or financial. And the example that we're providing today is that a client might also be a friend, a business partner, or even a family member. That is really tough. So you're working with a client and you walk into a store and you start purchasing these items and you're excited. You get to the register and you're buying everything up. And as you're walking out the store, you see your client standing there and they introduce or say, "Hey, how are you?" And you keep it very minimal and you say hi back. But the client goes,
Oh, thanks for shopping in my store today. I appreciate you.
now you might have known the client was a business owner, but maybe you didn't know what type or to what extent. So this is an example of how now this client, you have put yourself inside of their business by purchasing items, and then you also see them professionally. So that can be like an ethical dilemma, but it also shows a dual relationship that in this case you were unaware of. Let's go over types of dual relationships and then we'll dig a little bit deeper in some scenarios. Intentional dual relationships. This is agreeing to see a client who is also like a coworker's spouse. So this happens all the time where you're doing outpatient therapy. Your coworker or friend of yours feels that you're awesome. They think you'll do amazing with their child and you think you'll do amazing with their spouse, and you have a friendship with them. So that is intentional. If you decide to work with that client or work with that client's spouse or child, you are now entering a dual relationship with that client.
Definitely frowned upon, and I personally don't allow my supervisees or anyone that does outpatient with me to do these things. You want to take appropriate measures to make sure that you keep those relationships professional and healthy, and that's why you don't overcross that boundary.
That is definitely a boundary that if you decide to do that, It's an intentional thing. You're deciding, hey, I'm going to work with this person, and you're forming that dual relationship. Now, an unintentional dual relationship is running into a client in your small town and maintaining both a professional and a social connection. So in small areas, I've had situations where supervisees attended the same church as their client. They didn't know it. It was a church, they really enjoyed it. They looked up and saw their client in praise and worship. Keep everything appropriate and keep everything with that boundary in mind. So I wouldn't oversee a ministry and have that client be a part of it. Sometimes these things happen, but you can be proactive when you know about these situations and circumstances early on. So that way it won't be an intentional dual relationship. Either way, intentional or unintentional, these are types of dual relationships that happen. So we must be aware of it. So let's talk now about how we manage those boundaries when they are crossed. It's crucial to recognize when a boundary is at risk of being crossed. So some early signs include feeling too familiar with the client or discussing personal matters that are even unrelated to the session. When working in small and rural areas, these boundaries can be harder to maintain, but it's still crucial to avoid entering these dual relationships unless they're completely unavoidable. So the circumstances and situations we've talked about previously, a lot of them were avoidable. In the cases where they were unavoidable, we have to figure out how we can manage that appropriately. What do we do when a boundary is actually crossed? If a dual relationship can't be avoided, it's important to be very transparent with that client and whoever is supervising you. You want to create clear and written boundaries and regularly assess the relationship to ensure that it maintains the utmost ethics, that you're being ethical and the client is being ethical in that situation. Here's an example. You are working in an area, and it's a rural area, like the example, and you're working with a client, you're seeing them for an outpatient, and then you see them in praise and worship. And you realize you guys attend the same church, and then you're head of some ministry, and they decide they want to join the ministry.
Of course, you can't say, you can't join this ministry because I'm your therapist.
So this is something where it necessarily can't be avoided, but you want to be transparent with the client. Let your supervisor know the situation you're in at your church home and what's going on, and set clear boundaries. It would be something is where the client will not address you or talk to you as if they're your therapist. They would keep that relationship between you and them, not sharing with the rest of the people in the ministry. Maybe you will not work with that client one-on-one in that ministry. You will have somebody else oversee a certain role or specific things that require them to be more hands-on. Maybe do a lot of things in groups, so it's not a lot of individual stuff done with that person. So there are a lot of things you can do, but you have to be clear cut and have those boundaries written out, and then assess them on a regular basis to make sure that you and that client are not crossing those boundaries and that everything is staying on the up and up. Let's talk about a case study.
So imagine you're seeing a client who, after a few sessions, they invite you to a social event. What do?
Think about that for a moment. This is a classic example of a boundary issue, and it's important how you handle the situation. So my professional way of advising you to handle this is this way. So you have a client, you've been doing sessions with them, they tell you,
hey, I'm having a rehearsal or a recital, or I'm running this fundraiser event. I would love if you come, whatever it is. And they're inviting to this event.
I personally, when I'm facing those situations, I advise the client,
oh my goodness, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled that you even thought about considering me to come to your event. I know you worked so hard on this, and I know it's going to be a huge success. However, unfortunately, I don't really try to mix personal things with business. And since I'm seeing you on a professional level and I'm actually your therapist, I try to stay away from putting myself in situations and circumstances where things can become more. I'm not going to be able to make it, but I do wish you well, and I can't wait to hear about it during the next session.
That's pretty much what I would do in that situation. Or say it's a child. Sometimes it's hard. Kids invite you to their football game. They want you to come see them cheer, whatever it may be. I will let the client know,
oh my goodness, I know you're going to do amazing. You've been trying so hard to do this, practicing and preparing so much. Maybe the next session you can kind of show me some of your moves that you did in your chair. But, I have another engagement. Or you are my client and I like to keep that relationship the way it is here in the office. So I normally don't extend myself and go out to other events that my clients have, because I'd be running all over the place. I see 15 clients right now, and 10 of them play football and basketball. I can't go to your game and not theirs. So I try to be fair across the board and just don't go to any of them.
You have to find a way to get the client to understand that this is something that you're not willing to do, not wanting to do, but most importantly, you still respect them and you're pleased and excited. You thought them inviting you was very thoughtful. So these are the things that you want to consider, want to take in consideration when you're working with clients and you're not trying to cross over those boundaries and you're not trying to form a dual relationship. All right. Thank you so much for sticking with me, guys. Like always, I hope you continue to watch us on LCSW Vibes. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and share this with someone else. I know you know some other MSWs or some LMSWs that are working towards the LCSW, and you're trying to get them to study or understand that this is easier said than done, and they can, when it comes to studying, you have to actually put something in place, and these videos can be what you put in place. So yes, tell them about it. Share the love, definitely. And in our next video, we're going to dive into client self-determination and how to balance respecting client choices with providing professional expertise. This is probably one of my favorite videos that is going to be coming up. And it's so critical that you understand that when it comes to ethics. You're going to get tons of questions on the exam. You're not going to necessarily be able to say, oh, that's an ethics question. But if you know these ethics and you know what the code is telling you to do and how to handle things in certain situations, you're going to be A-okay. Be blessed until the next one. Have an amazing day.